The Spare, written by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and summarized by Storyscoops. The narrative opens amid a somber scene at Frogmore Gardens, where Prince Harry awaits a tense and uncertain reunion shortly after the funeral of his grandfather. The weather, the Gothic ruin, and the landscape all combine to underscore a mood of melancholy and reflection. This meeting is not just about mourning, but also about confronting family tensions and unspoken grievances. Harry reminisces fondly about his grandfather's strong personality, humor, and zest for life, alongside recognizing the interwoven dynamics of royal family history, including the stories and legacies of figures such as Wallis Simpson and Edward VIII. These reflections tie into broader questions about mortality, remembrance, and family loyalty. Central to the narrative is Harry's yearning for peace, personal, familial, and public. His mother's legacy of global peace advocacy is a guiding light for him. He endeavors to mediate and restore fractured relationships within the royal family, particularly with his brother William and Father Charles, despite sensing resistance and disappointment. The memoir, really delves deeply into Harry's childhood experiences at Balmoral and Ludgrove School, showcasing this blend of idyllic moments and, some pretty intense emotional challenges. It details the shock of his mother's tragic death, those painful familial estrangements, his role as the Spare, and the burdens and isolations that come with royal life. Harry's adolescence is honestly marked by a struggle to find identity and belonging amid all those public expectations and the relentless press scrutiny. His academic challenges, emotional turmoil, and attempts to connect with peers are, more often than not, overshadowed by his naughty public image. He grapples with grief and emotional shutdown, even as he tries to navigate typical teenage defiance and, sometimes, escapism. Recurring figures like Pa, his grandmother Gangan, Nanny Tiggy, longtime family friends, and outstanding influences like Marco, the safari guide, all illustrate a network of, complex support and strain. These relationships highlight themes of protection, surveillance, guidance, and Harry's ongoing quest for genuine connection. The royal lifestyle, its rules, spaces like Balmoral regalia ceremonies, and even punishments at school, is portrayed as both enchanting and oppressive. The narrative reveals the tension between heritage and individual freedom, highlighting contrasts between public duty and private pain. Harry often uses humor and physical activity like sports, hunting, and pulling pranks as ways to cope with internal strife, loneliness, and all those pressures. He finds escape in video games, parties, private clubs such as Club H, and the wilds of Africa where, distance from royal rigidity allows moments of freedom and self-expression. The hostile and often malicious nature of the British tabloid press looms large, with notorious fake stories, invasions of privacy, and character assassinations. Harry details how these relentless attacks exacerbated his feelings of alienation and defiance, while his family's responses sometimes felt like betrayal. One persistent undercurrent here is Harry's unprocessed grief over his mother's death. And honestly, his denial or even hope that she might still be alive. This unresolved trauma, it really shapes his emotional responses through adolescence and early adulthood, making it so much harder for him to mourn and actually move forward. The narrative goes on to describe a pretty complicated relationship with his elder brother William. There are these periods of alliance, but also misunderstanding and estrangement. Both of them are seeking their own paths, and the physical and emotional distance between them kind of illustrates these broader familial rifts, which are only aggravated by all those external pressures. Harry's journey at its core is a classic Bildungsroman, but it's complicated by royalty. He moves from being an innocent, playful boy to a young man burdened by invisible expectations, public roles, and a lot of internal conflict. The memoir really explores the paradoxes of privilege and isolation that are just, inherent in his position. From the serene gardens of Frogmore to the dangerous beauty of the African savanna, wildlife motifs symbolize freedom, survival, and connection. Encounters with a leopard and a fox become metaphorical guides and omens, representing Harry's search for meaning and reassurance amidst chaos. Harry's schooling at Ludgrove and Eton is marked by both affability and alienation, where academic struggles intersect with social pressures and expectations tied to his royal identity. The story underscores how education is both a refuge and a source of challenge, compounded by personal grief and public scrutiny. Club H, a secret bomb shelter beneath Highgrove, embodies Harry and William's secluded sanctuary from their highly surveilled lives. These hideouts provide critical space for friendship, mischief, and tentative emotional exchange, highlighting the yearning for privacy and normalcy. Experiences such as the blooding ceremony after killing his first animal or bowing to Queen Victoria, really underscore how ritual punctuates Harry's upbringing. These moments mark transitions from childhood to manhood in ways that are both meaningful and, honestly, a bit unsettling. Harry elaborates on the harsh truths of royal birth order. Being the spare is an accepted, almost mechanical role, yet it creates emotional conflict and a sense of invisibility. His narration reveals a deep questioning of these predetermined roles and, well, an ongoing quest for self-definition beyond tradition. Despite her absence, Harry's mother remains a central, almost mystical presence in his life. His descriptions of her lightness, strength, and love provide both comfort and sorrow, framing much of his internal landscape and, honestly, his public persona. Relationships with his father and stepmother are fraught with complexity, love mixed with distance, misunderstanding, and political strategy. These dynamics influence Harry's sense of self and his navigation of familial loyalty and independence. Harry's internal struggles clash with the externally projected image of the naughty prince, underscoring a dichotomy between who he is and who he is perceived to be. This conflict permeates his descriptions of schooling, media, and family life. Royal life is a double-edged sword, enchanting yet alienating. The memoir conveys that being born into royalty confers prestige and privilege but also imposes crushing constraints, surveillance, and emotional isolation. Harry's personal narrative consistently wrestles with balancing duty and selfhood. Unprocessed grief really shapes behavior and emotional availability. Harry's ongoing grief for his mother is a primary driver behind many of his struggles, academic, social, and emotional. This grief is complicated by denial and hope, which, delay his healing and affect his relationship patterns. Media intrusion intensifies personal pain and mistrust. The British tabloid press acts as both antagonist and force multiplier in Harry's life struggles, turning private pain into public spectacle and, quite often, undermining family unity by perpetuating rumors and fabrications. Family relationships are complex, often discordant but fundamentally pivotal. The memoir reveals that despite disputes and estrangements, familial loyalty and love remain foundational. The tensions really underscore the human cost of public and private conflict within the royal family. Identity is a puzzle of heritage, expectation, and personal desire. Harry's story, really portrays the challenge of growing into one's authentic self when preordained roles are imposed, and when historical legacies and public images shape perceptions from birth. Nature and animals provide revitalizing counterpoints to royal constraints. Harry finds vitality and meaning in nature, especially in those African wilderness experiences, where the strictures of royal life are, for a while, lifted and authentic connection is actually possible. Childhood and adolescence were marked by dualities, play, and pain. The memoir's accounts of childhood games, secret clubhouses, and school antics, they really contrast sharply with moments of grief, bullying, and emotional repression, painting a nuanced portrait of growing up royal under duress. Resilience emerges through humor, mischief, and connection. Humor and mischievous pranks are more than just coping mechanisms. They're actually expressions of resistance, humanity, and real attempts at forging connection in a constricted and surveilled life. The desire for reconciling past and present is a driving force. Even with all the upheavals and betrayals, Harry seeks understanding within his family's fractured history, aiming for peace, even if, honestly, the path is agonizingly slow and full of setbacks. The royal tradition demands emotional distance, but human nature, well, it seeks connection. The cultural expectation of royal emotional restraint clashes with those innate human desires for closeness, affection, and authenticity, creating this persistent tension in Harry's life. A pathway to healing lies through confronting truths and reclaiming autonomy. Harry's narrative closes on an implicit note that, while pain and complexity endure, there is hope for self-acceptance and agency beyond imposed roles and media caricatures. Frogmore Gardens and the Gothic ruin. This was the setting for the tense meeting with his father and brother. The scene is steeped in symbolism. The so-called fake Gothic ruin represents facades in family and royal life. The gardens themselves hold historical weight as a royal burial site. Grandfather's death and funeral observations. Harry recounts Grandpa's self-planning of his funeral and the atmosphere there, highlighting rituals around death and the family's complex attitudes toward mortality and remembrance. The legacy of Wallis Simpson and Edward VIII, still lingers. Their unusual royal interment under a plane tree, away from the main burial ground, really acts as a metaphor for exile and, well, the continued fractures within the family. When we reflect on Princess Diana's influence, it's clear her passion for peace, her humanitarian work, and, honestly, her deep familial love all stand in strong contrast to royal rigidity. These qualities drive much of Harry's motivation for reconciliation, and really shape his personal values. Details from childhood at Balmoral and Ludgrove, they paint a vivid picture. There were those intimate, playful, and sometimes chaotic moments with his brother William, interactions with family staff, and those early encounters with grief and loss that followed his mother's crash. Eton was, a tough place for Harry. He struggled with academic challenges that were only made worse by social alienation, strict tradition-bound protocols, and, the constant presence of police and guards for protection and surveillance. It was a lot for anyone to handle. Club H was, kind of a secret lair, a former bomb shelter that had been converted into a teenage clubhouse. It had music, alcohol, and most importantly, privacy. For Harry and William, it really symbolized a rare space of respite and bonding, away from all the pressures. The media campaigns and tabloid attacks got pretty intense. There were specific smear stories like fake drug use and even made-up rehab visits. All of this really shows the ruthless nature of tabloid journalism and, honestly, just how corrosive its impact was on Harry's well-being and public image. The safari in Botswana and the role of Marco really stand out. The African trip gave Harry a sense of freedom, a taste of adventure, and the guidance of a mentor. Marco's larger-than-life personality, along with his acceptance, brought Harry a rare feeling of normalcy and genuine joy. The blooding ritual and the experience of hunting were, honestly, both visceral and transformative. This initiation into stalking and hunting connected Harry to age-old traditions of life and death, as well as a deep sense of responsibility, both within the natural world and his royal heritage. When it comes to brotherly dynamics, protection, and conflict, there are, countless stories that show how William and Harry manage affection and rivalry, support and estrangement. These moments really mirror the broader tensions that exist within the royal family. The impact of September 11th on Eton and the sense of global awareness was profound. The sudden intrusion of global tragedy into the insulated world of Eton marked a moment of collective anxiety and confusion for Harry and his peers. Personal crises and mental health struggles played a significant role. The memoir touches on episodes of emotional distress, isolation, and self-medication, often masked by humor or defiance but really rooted in deep pain. Nanny Tiggy and the family staff acted as emotional anchors. Despite the complexities and rivalries within the family, loyal staff such as Tiggy provided continuity, care, and surrogate familial bonds. Royal protocols on physical contact. Emotional restraint is not just cultural but institutionalized, making genuine expressions of affection rare and fraught, contrasting sharply with Harry's experiences abroad. The role of humor amid pain. From mocking matrons at Ludgrove to playful pranks with Marco, humor emerges as a lifeline, turning the ridiculousness of royal life into a coping strategy. Explicit accounts of tabloid rumors. Sensationalist claims about paternity, drug use, and personal failings show the relentless, invasive pressure Harry endured, often from sources close to the family or court insiders. Shakespeare and literature. Conflicts with academic expectations, especially when it comes to British history and Shakespeare, really symbolize Harry's resistance to imposed identities and narratives. Spice Girls and media events. The bizarre juxtaposition of royal duties with pop culture, really exemplifies the surreal aspects of public life and just how these moments can magnify personal discomfort. Symbolism in animals and nature. Specific animals, the leopard in Botswana, the fox at Eton, even birds and insects, function as metaphors for watchfulness, freedom, and hope throughout the narrative. So, multi-layered memories and subjectivity. Harry often notes the unreliability and fragmented nature of his own memories, really highlighting the impact of trauma on recall and the construction of personal history. Private gestures in public settings, small moments like Pa's hands on Harry's face or the gifting of messages of pride, they illustrate these tentative attempts at connection amid a broader emotional distance. Alcohol and early rebellion. Early experiences with alcohol mischief and breaking rules reflect the youthful rebellion clashing with the royal image and expectations. Cultural and institutional changes in the royal family. References to evolving attitudes about mourning like flag controversies and funeral protocols, and family dynamics demonstrate the tension between tradition and modernization. Final touchstones, legacy, mortality, and hope. Concluding scenes with older relatives, deep family conversations, and moments of shared laughter point to enduring bonds and the importance of humor and love amidst hardship. This detailed, humor-infused summary captures the sweeping emotional, historical, and intimate contours of Prince Harry's memoir, extract highlighting the key events, reflections, and themes that define his journey from grief and conflict towards self-understanding.